So we are on impermanence, and seems to be kind of in the air, which is probably true. Air is impermanent, but it's this topic that we were talking about in the sutta study last night, and and I did a little mini retreat over the weekend at home. My wife was out of town, and so I just kind of did a lot of sitting and some reading, and yeah, naturally, when you read Dharma, you get reminded of impermanence a lot. So that happens to be the place we are in my book, which I'll talk about after we sit. So let's start our meditation. So settling into your posture, and you can close your eyes or just lower your gaze. And connecting with the body, the whole body, just feeling how you're holding your body, your posture, the balance, alignment. And you can sit with your eyes closed or open if you're more comfortable. Sometimes when there are strong emotions, it can be more helpful to let the eyes just open a bit. And feeling the body breathing. And just having a general sense of settling, of softening and releasing. Noticing your mind state right now. How are you feeling? Just in a general way, an open way, not thinking about it or trying to figure something out, just noticing feelings. What are the concerns of the day for you? When we meditate regularly, we start to see these patterns of thought, the types of obsessions, concerns that repeat over and over for us. And so our practice is a time when we can learn to be less taken by these habitual patterns of thought, can learn to take them less seriously. like stepping away from our own mind, seeing that there's this often fearful or maybe resentful being, or maybe a being that feels needy, feels it needs something to be okay. And stepping away, we can see the vulnerability, the frailty of the heart and mind. But from that view, observing, can also see that those concerns are tied up with a small view, a small view of self, of reality. That on a broader, maybe higher level, we see that we're always okay from the standpoint of pure awareness. Doesn't mean that there isn't discomfort, that there isn't pain, distress. But it's not so consuming as when we get caught in it. So let the mind be spacious, open. Give room for all the fears and resentments, cravings. But don't fall for them. Don't let them hijack your mind. Just see them coming and going. And try to be with this spacious awareness, with the breath, with the body. when you find yourself back in thoughts, losing that open perspective, recognize that this is what the Buddha meant by suffering being caused by grasping onto an idea, onto a feeling, onto a concept, onto a desire. This is the second noble truth, the truth of the cause of suffering. And we can see it for ourselves in those moments. And then come back to the broader perspective, letting go, connecting with breath, with space, with awareness. To enjoy that letting go. This is the third noble truth, the truth of the end of suffering. We can experience it for ourselves here and now. In just a moment of letting go. When our attachment or conditioning to a particular thought, some fear, thing that envelops our mind, when that is very strong, it can be difficult to let go. We might let go for just a moment, but then be swept back into that challenging thought, feeling. In those cases, sometimes it's wiser to go into the feeling rather than to try to let go of the thought. Thoughts are typically just words and images that don't have much substance, and so they can be very persistent in a certain way. Feelings can be felt in the body, and when we can be with sensation in this way, even when it's emotional sensation, it gives us something more substantial to which we can apply our mindfulness. And once we can really get absorbed into the feeling, that can be an effective way to cut off the thinking. The challenge and difficulty in that form of practice is that we often don't want to feel the feelings. And so it takes a degree of courage and trust to let go of that fear of feeling and breathe into the difficult emotion. Breathe with the feeling. Allow it to wash over us. Knowing and seeing that all feelings are impermanent. So our greatest fear of being trapped in a kind of hell realm of feeling is founded in a misunderstanding of reality. The idea that something can be permanent. So we breathe with the feelings, and even by simply letting go of the fear, this can be enough to change the whole energetic state, change the degree of difficulty in that feeling. It's so interesting to try to talk about the meditative experience to people who are meditating, and uh, to try to kind of transmit something. And there's something uh, there's kind of the question, am I just talking about my own experience? Am I talking about something that uh, other people can experience, and that, you know, um, is this just a personal way of experiencing things, or is this something more general or universal? And so I guess uh, my hope is that, through my experience, and obviously, I've heard a lot of other people teach meditation and read a lot about it, so that I am talking about something more universal. The other challenge is that, meditation is a non-material experience. It's called a mental experience, or I would say it's more like a neurological experience. And so even putting those experiences into words is tricky. Um, but that one of the things that I was trying to talk about today, it is one of the more difficult things to put into language, but I also think very important, because meditation instruction can get very mechanical, and it can just sort of seem like, oh, just do this and do this and do this, and then you're meditating. But those mechanics are really only trying to activate, one way to put it, an experience which is not mechanical, and can't be broken down into this step and this step and this step. Um, but I think it's really important to point to those uh, non-mechanical, non-material, experiences, uh, because otherwise, I don't think we're really meditating. You know, we can be sitting there and sort of following these steps, but nothing's really happening. We're just kind of like there, uh, and sometimes meditation is like that. Sometimes nothing is happening, right? Not sometimes the best you can do is just follow the steps and try to come back to the breath and all that. But we're really trying to um, open to some other ways of being. Uh, yeah, another way of being, another way of really viewing reality. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to change our perception and our understanding of reality. And that takes, a very, intuitive, organic process. Uh, and it takes time, but it also takes a certain amount of understanding about what we're trying to get to, you know. Um, we are not trying to get to a place where we can really feel our breath, and get and and our and all we're doing is feeling our breath. That's not like the goal, and yet the instructions often will seem like that is the goal, you know. Uh, and so particularly this morning, I was trying to point to something different, uh, which is being more aware of the mind, and then seeing that uh, our ordinary way of relating to our experience is this kind of trap, you know. or ordinary way of thinking and of viewing our lives, viewing moment by moment experiences, is, in Buddhist terms, ignorance and caught in delusion. You know, that there's a self doing this. I mean, I bring up golf because it's my little addiction and recovery. But yesterday I was playing golf and just realized like everything about this experience was about me. I was playing golf. It was my ball that I was hitting, my clubs, and my score, and that all of that stuff then gave something really important, which is like how worthy I am, how good I am at doing this, and then therefore how good a person I am, how worthy a person I am. And it's just so interesting to see how we bring that view to anything. I mean, it doesn't have to be even something that's difficult or that's like that we're trying to achieve. It can be how good you are at making an omelet. That's a good omelet, that they are my eggs and my pan and my butter and my spatula, and this is my omelet, and I am a good omelet maker, or I failed at making an omelet and it's terrible. Um, so this is having this view, being able to shift this view to seeing, oh, that's a creation, and it's actually causing suffering, then it is a doorway into a kind of freedom, to just not being so stuck in that. And it's not as if we're going to get to a point where it's like, oh, I just never, there's no self, I don't, nothing ever bothers me, I've transcended everything. But just to be able to, just like we come back to the breath for a moment, just to be able to step out of that from time to time and see, oh, okay, this isn't really not real. This is just ego. This is just a creation of the mind. Just that can be very freeing. And really, if you do that a few times each day, just try to do that like 3 or 4 times a day, it'll really change your day. It really will. It's a completely different way of being, and all of a sudden you're just not in that trap. Um, and since this is a recovery group, we can see how that's directly related to the 12-step literature. Self-centeredness is our problem, and all about ego, and that anonymity is the spiritual foundation of our program. That is, of course, that phrase from the 12th tradition. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. Anonymity in AA was about something different from what it is in Buddhism, but it turns out that it's just like another, like, kind of, in my mind, it's like Buddhism takes that idea that has a certain function in the 12-step world, and it takes it a step or two further, so that we see that anonymity is about not identifying with a self, right? And it's the foundation of the traditions, and it reminds us not to take things personally, to follow principles, to live by principles. So that's a little spontaneous stuff. So I'm going to go back to my book, A Burning Desire, which, is a book about uh, the idea of using the Dharma as a higher power. The subtitle is Dharma God and the Path of Recovery. And I'm in the section called The Higher Power of Wisdom, and in the part about impermanence. And just to say that when we say wisdom in Buddhism specifically, what we're often talking about is what's called the three characteristics of existence: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness or suffering, and not self. So I've been talking about not self this morning, but there's a direct connection with impermanence. So I'm on page 54 if you happen to be reading along. Seeing impermanence as central to our life's experience isn't just some spiritual exercise. It is a direct way to freedom from suffering. When we don't appreciate the pervasiveness of change, we are far more subject to the fear and distress that arises when the inevitable occurs. Without this kind of focus, we often wake up to change only when we reach a turning point or something extreme happens. Think how it feels when you lose a job, when a relationship ends, when your new car gets its first scratch, when your baby goes off to her first day at school. There's a kind of shock coming out of the dream of solidity and remembering again the fragile nature of reality. The Buddha was once asked how long we could be sure to live. Until your next out-breath, he said. That's it, just this breath. So he's implying pay close attention because this might be all you get. When I hear a traffic report of a fatal accident, I often reflect that the person didn't expect to die today. And I remind myself that here in my car is a very common place to die, that I might not get home, that I might be dead in a few moments. This helps me to hold a little more loosely the plans I have, the fears and hopes, to see that they are only thoughts, often stressful ones, and that what's real is this moment, this sense, experience, this feeling, this breath. This is one of the teachings of impermanence, to be fully engaged in this moment because it's going to change. The flip side of this insight is not to cling to this moment because it's going to change. How to engage fully without clinging is one of the skills that mindfulness meditation helps us to learn. It's interesting that whether things are going well or going badly, there tends to be this delusion that they're going to continue the way they are. When we're on top of the world with a new job or a new relationship, it rarely occurs to us that this is just a passing situation. In the same way, when things are bad, when we're unemployed or lonely, there's this feeling that we're stuck. Many difficult emotions are exacerbated by this mistaken sense. Depression and anxiety are especially prone to this problem. One of the reasons we can think of things as permanent is a trick of the way humans remember. When we are in a particular mind state, we tend to remember other times we were in that mind state. This is a result of the survival instinct. In any situation, the mind tries to find similar memories it can come up with that might help in dealing with the present moment. When we're fearful, the mind remembers moments of danger, trying to be helpful and give us tools for dealing with what's going on right now. Unfortunately, with negative emotions, this has the side effect of creating the illusion of solidity, the impression that these emotions are always there. So when we're depressed, it's easy to think, I'm always so depressed, not remembering all the happy times. Then when we're happy, we think, I really don't have a problem with depression. I'm happy most of the time. I don't know if that's exactly true, but I think you get the idea. Another byproduct of this process is the sense of self created by the repetitive memories. When we remember the same events and feelings over and over, it gives us the idea that there is something solid about who we are. And even if the memories and the feelings associated with them are painful, our craving for identity grasps at them. It seems odd, but our desire for stability, even if it's a stable state of misery, seems to be more powerful in some ways than our craving for happiness. And this craving is much like the way that desire itself functions in us. It keeps us on the treadmill of grasping after the ungraspable. It keeps telling us that this mind state or this job or relationship or car, house, iPod, you can tell how old this book is, iPod, computer, this whatever is going to last. Like Charlie Brown trying to kick the football Lucy holds, or Wile E. Coyote trying to catch the roadrunner, we keep falling for the same old trick of the mind. This is samsara, the endless cycle of birth and death, of ignorance and suffering that the Buddhist path seeks to escape. Ay, ay, ay. So, I remember, if you will, I'm just talking about memory here. I remember the moment when I put this together about memory and how it creates this impression of things. I was at Cloud Mountain Retreat Center, and I was just about to open the door to the outhouse, you know, uh, and something in that moment like flashed, and just like all kind of came together in my mind. Oh, like I'm in a mind state, and when I'm in this mind state, I remember other times of being in this mind state. You know, it's so interesting to watch how memory works, right? I mean, we see it all the time. You know, you hear a song and it reminds you of where you were when you first heard that song, or what. You know, I've been obsessing about this album, probably what I could one of my favorite albums. And the time that the album made the most impression on me was on my first acid trip. So like it really, like, man, that was like made a memory. So I hear this album and then I'm like, oh yeah, that night, and then blah blah, and you know where you can go with something like that. Okay, other acid trips, or what was going on in my life, or how I wound up in a mental hospital 2 months later. Oh, what was there a relationship? Did the Was it the acid or was it the music? And you just see how, the Buddha calls this mental proliferation, papancha. Just one trigger, right? One guitar riff, and you're off. Uh, no, not Marrakesh Express. This is a more obscure album, Love Forever Changes. I was talking about it the other day. It's anyway, and the album happens to be, it's called Love, which is the name of the band, but they called the album Love Forever Changes. Impermanence, anybody? A lot of the album is about impermanence. Anyway, just it's so helpful, like to get ourselves out, to break out, right? Is to go, oh, what? Where am I right now? You know, and there's this great term the Buddha uses, disenchantment. Where we become enchanted with our own thoughts, our own memories. You know, I mean, I'm total sucker for going back over certain periods of my life. Did anybody do that at all? Any of you old people? Like somehow you always land back in that moment with that person or in that situation. Like, oh, here I am again. Oh, but as if we're somehow gonna like fix it or oh, the road lot taken. I should have gone left instead of right. You know, um, it's really bizarre. Um, so it's not probably even worth thinking too much about because the main thing is stop that now. You know, there's a great teaching. There's this one sutta on the removing of distracting thoughts, and the Buddha has these 5 strategies, and they work their way up to the most intense strategy, which is beat down like a strong man would beat down and crush a smaller man. Nice, but beat down that thought, right? Like when it's back in that, you know, that time, you just don't need to go back there. It's gone. You forget. Beat that down. I've talked about how I had this moment uh, when on a retreat, sometime probably about 7 or 8 years ago, at Gil Fronsdale Center, Insight Retreat Center. Uh, It's interesting how the memories from retreats can be very powerful. And I was doing walking meditation in this upstairs room. I was the only person in there walking back and forth. And I started thinking about this person who was very important in my life when I first started to do Buddhist meditation. And all the pain, heartbreak, regret, shame, the whole catastrophe of that relationship. And I suddenly realized, oh, every time I'm on a retreat, I think about this person. Every time. And I haven't seen them in 30, 40 years. They're not part of my life. They don't matter to me anymore. Stop. And I made a vow right then not to do that anymore. I just made the vow. From now on, whenever the thought of that person comes up, boom, I'm just letting it go because there's nothing there. The no there. Gertrude Stein describing Oakland in the early 20th century. Strange. There's definitely a there now. Sorry. But they quoted that in the January 6th hearings yesterday, if anybody was listening. Anyway, that's a side issue. But there's no there, like there's nothing in that memory to learn from, right? It's like what I was describing here, how sometimes it's like wallowing, right? Well, I think, is that like a common thing for drug addicts, or is it just all human beings like to wallow sometimes, Ooh, it's really muddy and gross and stinky in here. Let me go in. Oh, God. So, I ceased wallowing in that particular memory. And, there's probably a couple dozen others, maybe a couple million others that I could I could try to let go of. But I guess the point is to start to notice, not the point, but one of the points is to notice the interconnection and realize, I'm having this memory not because God or whatever, or like I really need to think about this. I'm having it because that song played, because I smelled that flower, because that dog barked. It's just, it's Pavlovian, right? It's just some conditioning, some trigger sets off a memory. It's not important. Our mind tells us that these things are important, and then we realize, oh, it's really not. It's just a thought. I can stop. I can just like change the channel, Spotify, please play, something I've never heard before, for which I have no memories. All right, so I'll open it up for any comments or discussion. If there are, I may have whacked everybody. Oh God, what did he just say? Hey, Bill, hi.
Hey, what's doing? And Morrigan is another one that's good too.
Oh, you're right. That's the album.
I know. It's one of my favorite. Anyway, getting back to this other stuff you're talking about.
Unbelievable.
Earlier, you're talking about meditation, and you brought up like sometimes steps, whether it's a process of getting to a certain place or whatever. But I've been leading a lot of meditations for about the past year for a recovery group, and some of these people aren't really, daily meditators or whatever. So I got to kind of use a step.
Mm-hmm.
When you're leading something like that, like a body scan, for instance, to me is a good way to get people to like really start paying attention to something other than all the other bullshit that's out there, right? So you start with the head and all the way down. And I've gotten comments on saying this really helps me, and all this kind of stuff. So that's not really what you're talking about as a step, or you're talking about more for your own ideal for meditation?
Bill, thank you for asking that. It's a really good question, because and you've heard me talk enough to know that I like to try to keep my teachings in balance. And the fact is that sometimes it's good to have steps. And today I was talking about letting go of them. But just that's a perfect example of like, oh, these people aren't ready to move into just a spacious mind state, because they're just too spaced out. There's too much going on for them to they won't be able to find the space. They'll just go off into thinking.
Right. Yeah.
So absolutely, so let's think of this as a developmental process that can happen during a sit if you're experienced. Like I often start out in mechanical ways, in a step-by-step way, in a sitting period, but I'm kind of trying to move myself into a more organic kind of spatial awareness or open awareness. So it's the same applies to someone generally learning to meditate. At first, you have to learn some mechanics and get grounded enough so that then you have to have a certain amount of concentration before you can move into that spaciousness. And when people are first learning meditation, that most of them don't have that. So that's very wise what you're doing, and it's a really important question. And thank you for that. Correct.
And a lot of times I just plagiarize the hell out of you anyway, so it doesn't make any difference. But
well, let's it's all we're all plagiarizing.
I know.
I know. Not like I made it up, but thank you. And I hope that my teaching is useful to be plagiarized.
No, it is. And there's one other real quick note about golf, because as you know, I'm addicted pretty bad myself, but
I'm sorry.
Well, I know, but it's one of the most, of all the activities I've ever done in my life, and I've been playing a long time, it is one of the most being in the present types of things you can do.
Yeah.
And whether you're preparing for a shot or you're just the way you're looking around at nature, you might be concentrating on a tree or something, or a bird or whatever, but or watching Eleanor doing her knitting during the meditations and stuff like that. So I know I used to see her at Spirit Rock up there. She's paying complete attention to you, but she's got the knit out. So, thank you, Eleanor. Anyway,
I was reading something from Ajahn Pasano this weekend, about Ajahn Chah, and someone asking Ajahn Chah, saying, "Well, my friend doesn't like to meditate and do sitting meditation, but he likes to do rock climbing. And when he's rock climbing, he says, then he's totally present, and then that's his meditation." And Ajahn Chah said something like, "Yeah, but can he contemplate the Four Noble Truths when he's when he's rock climbing?" Because people often talk about sort of having these, uh, being very present when they're doing extreme activities, right? Dangerous activities. Um, and I thought that that was interesting, because really what he's saying is you can have certain qualities, you can be mindful and you can be concentrated, but you can't really be insightful in that moment, because there's too much uh, pressure on that, on just staying alive. On the other hand, with golf, you get to experience suffering after every shot, so or attachment. So we get to contemplate the Four Noble Truths and practice mindfulness. Okay, you guys are all going to abandon me soon if I keep talking about this. Monica, what do you want to say?
I was I thought this was a really interesting discussion about on many topics, but the the idea how these memories come in triggered by a song, and they're so. I was so. Last summer we were on a road trip, and this song came up, and I remembered this boy I had met when I was 16, and it was so bizarre because it was like a 5 minute thing,
Uh-huh.
and it wouldn't go away. But I'm also, the more I get into the material, I have these periods where something like that would happen, and I assumed it was my ego going, "No, I don't want you to get mindful. I want you to be, so I assume, I assumed it was my ego, but would that be would that be correct?
Um, sure. I mean, what isn't, uh, you know, uh, but I'm not sure what you mean by,
Well, I guess it's the self battling with the not self, maybe.
yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, that was
Well,
what came to my mind.
okay, so you have to understand that this idea of a self is just an idea, so it can't battle with anything. It's it's the feeling that there is a self is created by the memories. So that's just an illusion that, oh, I was there, that was me, I remember that, that was me then, this is me now, it's all been me. That's the self, that's the creation of the self. And when you step out of it and go, oh, that memory is a thought of something that maybe happened in a similar way to what my mind is telling me happened, but like it's a completely it's incomplete, because any memory is just some neurons firing, and actually there was like the whole world was there in that moment, and that's not what you're remembering. It's very, it's just this sort of selective, conditioned impression, and we are making the assumption that, oh, that's self, that's me, and then when we remember that it's not, we're just seeing, oh, it's just a thought arising right now, and then we have that choice. I mean, what's important about that is that in that moment, then we have that choice. Oh, if I let go of this, I can end suffering, because that's what this is all about, right? It's not about anything else. It's not about metaphysics or philosophy or even psychology of self and ego. And it's just right now, having this thought, this memory, is causing this feeling to be here, which is uncomfortable, and it's not necessary. If I just stop and breathe and just am present, I can let go of suffering. And that's what the Buddha said he taught. He said, I teach suffering and the end of suffering. That's all I'm trying to do. So don't make it more complicated by trying to like figure out, well, what's self and what's not self. It's like it's all self. It's all, any thought is creates the illusion of self, and that's, it's not, oh God, what's wrong with me? I'm creating an illusion of self. It's like, you're a human being. That's what you do. That's fine. But is that causing you suffering right now, and can you let it go? That's really the only important question.
Well,
So,
that was awesome. Thank
oh,
you.
thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, that was a great. I got a lot out of that, so I'm gonna be
Well,
considering
you
that.
know what we say, keep it simple, right? So let's keep it simple. Is there suffering? Let it go. So Julie made a really good suggestion. I thank you, Julie, for that, if she's still here, which is she was commenting that um, at the end of my Spirit Rock classes, I always do a little uh, dedication of merit. Those are longer classes, so but so I think I'm going to just suggest, I'm not going to dedicate merit. Let's dedicate. It's all good. It's all dedicated. But I'm just going to suggest, whew, that we take this being together and this time of practicing together into our day now. For me, this is kind of like the start of the day. I mean, I've been up for a few hours, but it's kind of like a start the day. I know for everybody's not on the West Coast, but for those of you who are, just let's take our connection and our groundedness, whatever we get out of being together like this, into our day, and try to let go of suffering, and try to be present and connect and bring love into our day. So, peace. Nice to see you all.